Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Knowing Wheel, episode 145, I believe, of your favourite Formula 1 show. And as always, I am joined by Jamie183. How are we doing, my guy?
I'm good. There was a lot of Formula 1 content over the weekend in terms of races and track action. I didn't watch loads of it because it was quite a busy weekend, but yeah, we're here to talk over it. I think I know what went on, so yeah, we'll see what we go up to.
Well, we'll find out whether Jamie knows what went on over the weekend. But of course, you know, if you're watching this on my main YouTube channel, as always, we've just serving our reminder, we've only probably got about 7 or 8 more episodes to go of Knowing Wheel before it goes exclusively on its own YouTube channel. It's not disappearing or anything like that. So yeah, there'll be a link down in the description below. Get yourself subscribed. Jamie, how many subs are you on in our weekly update?
548. It's not changed in a while. So
548. We're up to 286.
It's going well.
So we are closing in. We're less than half.
Yeah, about 40%.
We're more than halfway there.
40% left, and then we're done. All right.
We will overtake Jamie183 within.
I guess I don't plan on not growing anymore once we reach me, but there we go. Next target is to get us to do the tour of all the teams.
Exactly. it's going to be good fun in the future. But obviously we did a preview show ready for the Brazilian Grand Prix, so we didn't really have a lot to discuss going into the weekend. So I guess, Jamie, we move straight into Friday's action. Or 1 bit of news before Friday's action, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, just as they tend to do. If a track is about to extend a contract, they tend to announce it just before the weekend action to kind of, you know, give a little press release to them beforehand. So that is what happened. We are racing at Interlagos until 2030, which is good news because there was a few whispers a few years ago, now a pretty long time ago now, about it getting replaced. Do you remember that? With the old... It had a lot of vowels in it. It was like Juncadella or something. Is that right?
I believe you're thinking of a Spanish racing driver.
Maybe I am. There was another Brazilian circuit.
There was talks about another Brazilian circuit. There were talks about them potentially hosting a race in Rio de Janeiro, wasn't there? Or elsewhere. But none of that, of course, is happening. And to be honest, considering obviously we're in Mexico last week, we're kind of at the idea, aren't we, that once Perez drops off the map, then so will the Mexican Grand Prix. I guess there's always been that little bit of a concern about that with Brazil as well, because we haven't had a Brazilian Formula 1 driver since Massa and Nasser both came off at the end of 2017.
No,
Nasser was 2016,
that. Yeah.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
I guess we had Pietro Fittipaldi for a couple of races.
Oh, one race. Yeah, 2 races in 2020.
Haquera was the one I was trying to think of.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not Portuguese, nor do I speak it, so that's probably butchered.
Neither, fun fact, is Alberto Fabrega.
No.
Based on last week's episode, nor is he Mexican.
No, he's not any of those similar things to Spanish. So, yes, that was a bit of good news for the circuit. I think Brazil is a bit safer than Mexico because they've got a lot more heritage in Formula 1. And obviously, I would say the fans, I don't want to cause controversy, but they are better.
I think they're more passionate, I think it would be argued. But I wouldn't necessarily say... Has he got more history? I think Mexico's been on the calendar longer.
But Brazil, in terms of a nation, has a lot more heritage in F1 in terms of
absolutely,
drivers
There's
and
a lot more
champions and race wins.
Brazilian history inside Formula 1, definitely. You know, it's weird when we obviously mentioned that a second ago, that the fact there hasn't been a Brazilian on the grid for the last 6 years, because prior to that, there were Brazilians pretty much non-stop since about the 60s or 70s, I think, weren't there? You pretty much always had a Brazilian on the Formula 1 grid, and usually 2 or 3.
Yeah, and usually they were world champions by the end of their career, or at least race winners.
Close, yeah. I was going to say, a lot more race winners than world champions. Looks at Barrichello and Massa.
True. But hopefully they do get a driver on the grid. I can't recall. I guess Enzo Fittipaldi, is he the...
you've got...
Who's the one in F2 at the minute?
You've got Felipe Drugovich.
Yeah.
Who, of course, is confirmed to stay with Aston Martin next year. You've got Gabriele Bortoleto in Formula 3, who's just won the Formula 3 championship. And Enzo Fittipaldi is also in Formula 2.
I just had to double check. I thought Bortoleto was Spanish, but you're right. He is Brazilian.
He definitely is Brazilian. No, I'm aware of what country some people are from, Jamie, unlike you.
Yes, clearly.
But I think, I would be shocked if we go another 6 years without a Brazilian driver in Formula One. I think I'll go out on a limb and suggest that. We'll see a Brazilian racing in Brazil before that contract comes to an end. But yeah, moving on though into the race weekend. Obviously, free practice was fairly undramatic, wasn't it? There wasn't a lot to talk about.
Not too much.
Obviously, all teams just desperate to try and get the cars set up again inside an hour. And then obviously we moved into Friday night qualifying, where, funnily enough, Jamie actually gave me a fantastic stat. Apart from the Aston Martins and the Alpha Tauris, qualifying on Friday and qualifying on Saturday were identical.
Give or take. They weren't the same positions, but like the same bunch of cars went out in Q1 and SQ1 and Q2 and SQ2.
Q2 and SQ2, yeah.
Apart from the two Aston Martins and the two Alpha Tauris swap places. So,
which is mad.
Yeah. Yeah, which we'll get onto a bit later, I'm sure. But sprint weekends obviously give us real race qualifying on the Friday. And then you got the sprint Saturday with all of the things sprint race happening at once. So Friday night left us with just a fairly undramatic couple of opening qualifying sessions. We had Alfa Romeo's just being absolutely abysmal, 18th and 20th for them. And also the Alpha Tauris having a little bit of a return to regular form, with both going out in Q1. The rest of the weekend they had some good pace, so it's a bit odd to see them both out then.
I would argue it wasn't regular form. I think that was the whole point on Friday night. Recently, anyway.
More recently, yeah. It's the first time Tsunoda's been out in Q1 since Hungary, supposedly.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, that's mad.
And then Logan Sargent with his regular back row appearance on P19. And yes, Q2, there was a bit of whispering of rain. Obviously, the clouds in Brazil gather very quickly. So we've seen a few wet races there in the past. But this time round, they were pretty confident. Certainly Haas were fairly confident it wasn't imminent for Q2. And they were proven right. It just got very dark. But similarly, getting dark was Haas's prospects as they both went out in Q2 as well.
That's a fantastic segue.
That is unbelievable. And now you draw attention to it has ruined it. Thank you very much. With Ocon and Gasly sandwiching Hulkenberg in 11th, Magnussen 14th, and Albon, who had his only lap time deleted because he was, obviously we see there's not enough tyres ready to go around for a whole sprint weekend, so Albon was trying to get through with just the one set and had his time deleted.
Which was a shame, wasn't it? And then obviously we move into Q3, and it pretty much looks like nightfall is descending on Sao Paulo, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that meant that it basically was only time for one run. It was basically whoever was like first had a big advantage, wasn't it? and that was Max Verstappen, so we didn't even get any excitement there. In what could have been an unpredictable qualifying session, Verstappen still took pole, Charles Leclerc still ended up on the front row. Aston Martin, though, had a good return to form. We've kind of, spoke about them up and down in the last few weeks. I love the rumour that we never even spoke about this week, that Helmut Marko apparently claimed that Alonso made the rumours up himself about him going to Red Bull next year.
Who keeps giving Helmut Marko a microphone?
I don't know who keeps allowing him anywhere near a Formula 1 weekend. I mean, we'll speak about someone else that shouldn't be at a Formula 1 weekend in a minute. But yeah, I think the only kind of big moment, wasn't it, was Piastri. Unfortunately, obviously, binned it right at the end of the qualifying, although it was believed it was a gust of wind. Nico Rosberg 2015.
It was also getting wetter and wetter as the rain started to fall. So Piastri was one of the last.
After everyone had done their laps, to be fair.
But I guess,
and he ruined Perez in the process.
He did. Perez was the last driver out on track, and then came across a McLaren in the gravel or in the grass. So yellow flags meant Perez obviously had to back off, and that was that for him. So P9 on the grid. But to be fair to him, the rest of the weekend he was acceptably okay.
He was a decent number two, a pretty bog standard number two, wasn't he? Just not a number two in a completely dominant car.
Maybe not.
Which was a shame. But yeah, I mean, I always find it hilarious as well, Jamie, when obviously it's absolutely start hammering it down, and then the FIA go and red flag the session.
It's like, what's the point?
Just run the clock. Like, no one's binned it or anything. It's not going to dry up again.
I guess it's safety, isn't it? Because if someone fancied it, they could just go out And if the track is too unsafe to drive, obviously the teams are dumb for going out, but the FIA have still got to tell them it's too unsafe to.
Yeah, I suppose. It's just stupid, wasn't it?
But they did red flag it and then basically immediately cancelled the rest of the session. They were just like, session will not be restarted with like 6 minutes on the clock because they had to wait. They'd have had to wait like hours for it to get dry enough to race.
Well, they would have had to wait till Saturday, wouldn't they, really, to get on with it? I mean, there was some pretty scary looking scenes though around the circuit, wasn't it, after qualifying was wrapped up on Friday night. There was some grandstands with the roofs being ripped off, things like that. It was a proper storm that barreled in over Sao Paulo. And of course that was all because obviously the session got delayed because Fernando Alonso had an issue in free practice.
Yeah, it was delayed 15 minutes, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so without that it would have been normal. I wonder if the storm was similar to the storm that struck the south of England last week as well.
Can't imagine they were related. Funny enough. Fun fact for you, Jamie, storms never actually cross the equator. They always form at the equator and either go north or south.
Wow.
They
I
never
wasn't
cross
expecting
it.
a geography lesson, but there we go.
There you go, yeah. As we move, though, on into Saturday sprint qualifying, as we said, Aston Martin and AlphaTauri swapped, so that meant Stroll was pretty much back to normal after his P3 on Friday night, looking like he kind of been invited to the cool kids table with no idea why. He was backing out in Q1. He wanted nothing to do with Max and Charles, did he? But easily the weirdest moment was Ocon and Alonso's beef.
Yeah, very, very strange from Ocon. Obviously, he's prone to the odd collision in Brazil. But
at turn 1 or turn 2.
Yeah, the center S's. So Alonso off the line, trying to get out the way on the outside of turn 3. And Ocon comes out of turn 2, slightly turning left towards turn 3 and loses his back end, has a bit of wobble of oversteer, which obviously puts him further out than he would have been. And his rear right absolutely clouts Alonso's front left. Quite a violent collision at high speed. Ocon's in the wall. Alonso's obviously got race-ending damage or qualifying-ending damage. And Ocon immediately calls Alonso an idiot before... I hope he backed down on it because it was clearly Ocon's mistake in my mind.
He didn't.
He did.
Believed he hadn't made the mistake. He believed there was no mistake made by himself. He didn't feel like he'd lost the car. Now, I don't believe that was Alonso's fault for a single second. But had he been further off the racing line, there wouldn't have been contact there. Because I think Ocon would have gathered it up again, or had all but gathered it up. It just so happened that Alonso was where he'd gathered it up to. That's not to suggest that Fernando is any way to blame, but possibly could have been further off the line.
I think he left a good enough gap.
He left a car and a half.
Easily, maybe 2 cars. Ocon was fairly offline. I saw a video from the fans, like the grandstand just there.
Yeah.
And that was like, Alonso left a lot of space, and Ocon lost it himself.
Yeah. It was certainly. I mean, it was just quite funny, of course, that it had to be Alonso and Ocon that had that beef, of course, after the end of last year.
Well, it's Brazil last year, wasn't it? They had a bit of fallout, didn't they?
They certainly did again, another one. But all very, very funny, wasn't it? And again, though, obviously it was the Haas of Magnussen and Hulk that looked strong in SQ1, just like they did in Q1, and then just didn't have the pace to make Q3 or SQ3. And obviously Gasly as well in the less beefified Alpine was also out. And again, obviously it was just a one-shot Q3.
Yeah, 8-minute session, so not quite enough time to do, and not enough tyres to do 2 runs.
I think that was the bigger issue.
Yeah.
I think if they wanted to do 2 runs, they could have, had they had the tyres.
Yeah, so that left us with a bit of a lull at the start for a few minutes until eventually they started coming out the pits and doing just fine. And Lando Norris was doing fine and took pole position, or sprint king, or whatever it's called these days. I don't know. Fastest in qualifying by 600ths from Max Verstappen was very impressive, and not the first time that Red Bull haven't taken a sprint pole in recent events. So yeah, was nice for him. He obviously felt like he made a mess on Friday, so I think he was very pleased with that. Although, yeah. The race, probably he knew that Red Bull always seemed to be stronger over a race distance, especially Max Verstappen. So whether he thought he could get his first kind of win, although he immediately said it wouldn't count anyway because it's a sprint, It's very good.
Only
very
because
good
he's
stuff.
jealous of Oscar.
Yeah, he's like, Oxford win doesn't count. It could well be. Probably is that, to be honest.
Yeah, I reckon that must be the case. But yeah, I mean, McLaren had looked quick all weekend up to that point, hadn't they? And as we would go on to discover, both in the sprint race and the real race, of course, Lando Norris will fight anyone tooth and nail unless their name is Max Verstappen, because he basically just gave up the lead at turn 1, didn't he? And Max just sailed off and won.
I think he fights anyone he believes he has a chance of winning against over a race distance. And Max Verstappen, he doesn't really have a chance of beating over race distance. Everyone else he does, so yeah.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that later on. But yeah, obviously, sprint race, though, was very, very good early on. Hamilton, of course, getting around the outside of Sergio Perez down at turn 4. And Russell takes Norris without crashing himself off at turn 10. Which was a good little dive bomb, wasn't it?
It was a very good little dive bomb, and actually was committed to it, unlike Lewis Hamilton was back in 2019. So, yeah, good opportunistic move. Norris down to 3rd from the first place by the end of lap 1. And as soon as Max Verstappen took the lead, we kind of knew it was...
We waved goodbye. He
probably
was like
done. Harry Potter on the train, yeah. And we thought at this point, obviously, Russell's 2nd, Hamilton's 4th. Could it be Mercedes are back?
Mercedes are fighting.
Their annual Brazilian Grand Prix win. Is it on? And it turns out it definitely wasn't on. And the rest of the race was kind of spent watching them fall back through the grid, which was quite funny.
The rest of the weekend was watching them go backwards, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Perez, it wouldn't take him long before he'd get the jump on Lewis. Norris then, at pretty much the same time, wouldn't he? Would jump Russell. And like we said, kind of the rest of the race was just watching Mercedes try and hang on, but slowly losing more and more positions, wasn't it?
Yeah, eventually to the point of losing 6th place to Yuki Tsunoda, which was very entertaining as a non-Lewis Hamilton fan. But yeah, look, Yuki Tsunoda up in P6, very good stuff from him. The sprint race, it was eventful. It was better than Kota sprint, so that was good. But again, it wasn't really meaning very much. So, yeah,
again, it was just a spoiler, wasn't it?
Yeah, because immediately
what was going to be expected on Sunday.
We go into Sunday knowing that Max is the fastest, Norris is probably the 2nd fastest, Mercedes
useless,
are terrible, and Aston Martin kind of have the pace to hang, but not like they obviously had to come through the grid on Saturday, whereas they were starting higher up on Sunday. So it's kind of just a spoiler. Sergio Perez said, "Bring in reverse grids," which I'm like, yes. Keep saying it, Checo. I want to see you keep around.
Checo's saying that because he won't have a drive by next year.
And reverse grid might mean he starts on pole. Yeah.
Exactly. What we hadn't predicted, though, Jamie, or what Saturday hadn't spoiled, was, of course, when we got to Sunday, that Ferrari would again Ferrari. And before the race had even started, Charles Leclerc had a hydraulic failure.
Yeah, on the way to the grid on a formation lap. It's unbelievably Ferrari, isn't it?
I don't get how Ferrari are always the team that allows this to happen. It's never Mercedes having a hydraulic failure before the start. It's never Red Bull have a failure, or Aston Martin or McLaren McLaren have a few times in the past. Why does it always feel like when a driver has a DNS, they're in a Ferrari car?
It's just like they're not a very well-run organisation, I don't think. They're just... Yeah, there's so many...
Money can't save their problems anymore.
There's such a, like... I don't know, there's just constant failures in that organisation.
Well,
I feel
Ferrari had 2 things over the last 15 years that have been able to carry them. Money and prestige. They now can't use the money, and prestige doesn't get you far in Formula 1.
Ross Brawn helped, and Michael Schumacher. I guess that was more than 15 years ago.
That's what I mean, since then, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Who knows with Ferrari, to be honest. Leclerc is obviously lamenting a lot. I quite enjoy this part of the season because every time a driver has a problem, they just lose it. And they're so annoyed because there's no need to be positive. It's just like, get me on holiday. It's such a funny part of the season.
I bet he was on a plane before the race was even finished had he had his way.
Yeah. Did you see the Mexican Grand Prix team radio after the race from Hulkenberg, who obviously had some hope during the race that he might actually score a point.
Yes.
And then it all fell apart at the end. He was like, to his manager, or I guess trader or whoever, he was like, "Get the helicopter, I'm out of it."
Yeah, mad.
So it's just like, I love the drivers just being annoyed with their teams, because all season
half of them are just fed up, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean basically everyone, all 19 apart from Max, and I guess Lando's doing okay.
Well, Lando's hoping he can try and poach P3 or P2 in the championship, isn't he?
Yeah,
still?
if he gets P3, that'd be mad. We'll get onto that later, but yeah,
that would be mad. But yeah, we did finally get a race start though. Luckily, Charles, obviously after that failure, was able to get the car out of the barrier and into a safe space, so the race start wasn't delayed. But drama pretty much kicked off immediately. After Aston Martin had their brilliant qualifying, we'd all kind of said Lando Norris had underperformed on Friday night. And then basically got back to where we expected him to by turn 1, had moved up into P2. Lewis had also got both of them and had gone back to P3. But the drama behind was Kevin Magnussen has not been given enough stick, I believe, for this. Because not only did he basically take out his teammate, but he took out Albon as well before turn 1.
Yeah, it was such a lack of awareness, and a driver of his experience should know better, I think. Because effectively, he's on the inside of 2 cars on his outside. Almost like what Perez did. Although Perez was in a braking zone.
Yeah, I was going to say it was more like Sebastian Vettel at Singapore.
Yeah, he's just moving across as if he's the only one on the racetrack, and you've literally just started a race with 18 other cars. Yeah, it was very poor, and that sent Albon into the side of Hulkenberg. It was Magnussen into Hulk, into Albon, wasn't it? But Hulkenberg was able to carry on.
Somehow.
Magnussen and Albon straight out of the race. Albon, his wheel, then took out Daniel Ricciardo as well, and Hulkenberg, in the process, clipped Oscar Piastri, who also needed repairs. But he had time to do the repairs due to the red flag that immediately came out. So all of that work by Aston Martin and the lack of work from Lando Norris on Friday was just undone, and they were back where they should have been.
And yeah, with another restart to potentially allow some drama. But it did basically mean, didn't it, of course, because the red flag didn't get called immediately for some reason, which meant obviously that Ricciardo and Piastri, who'd both thought they'd retired, then were allowed to go back into the race because they could get the cars repaired in time. Basically spent the rest of the afternoon trundling around by themselves.
A lap down, yeah.
A lap down to most of the other competitors. But the restart, though, did allow Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton a vintage little battle that not only was clean, but was also respectful and good to watch. Because, as we say so often, the drivers that have been around for more than 10 years actually know how to race wheel to wheel.
Yes. And it was a good move, wasn't it, for Alonso on Lewis?
Very good move. I will hold my hand up and admit that as someone that doesn't like Fernando Alonso and does like Lewis Hamilton.
Yes. And actually, there seems to be a little bit of a battle at the sharp end of the field, with Max Verstappen under some pressure for kind of the first time ever in 2023. But
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good from Norris that he was able to hang with Verstappen and actually had a go. It was like quite far into the race, lap 8, I believe, lap 8 or 9.
Wow.
Well, it wasn't lap 2. And Norris did have a go into turn 1. Verstappen had to go defensive.
Well, have a go is strong. As much as Lando will against Max.
He kind of knocked on the door and then immediately backed off. And then Max, able to hold him off and break the DRS, and then kind of drove into the distance as ever.
It felt honestly like one of those ones where Red Bull have gone, right, don't pull away too far. Oh no, Lando's too close, right, just get on with it, Max, for 2 laps.
Like
show the car's pace.
With the sprint race at the end.
Yeah, and then just, right, he's 3 seconds back now, you can just afford to sit down and
I would love to see what would happen if Verstappen actually pushed for a whole race distance.
Well, put a decent number 2 in the car. It's why when people go on about it, I like why Mercedes back in 14 to 16 was still fantastic, despite the fact it was a dominant car, is because you had 2 drivers that were still having to go for it all the time.
Because you get the feeling Verstappen's probably at 40% all the time.
I do genuinely reckon if Max Verstappen, so say you had 2 Max Verstappens in that car, so obviously they were going at it, if they didn't take each other out every week, which they would, they sensibly, I'd say, more often than not this year, unless you get a well-timed red flag or safety car, would lap most, if not the entire rest of the field. I reckon if you put two Maxes in that car and say they were told one just had to sit directly behind the other one applying pressure, they would have been 45, 50 seconds ahead of Lando by the end of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've probably got another on for half a second a lap that they're not using right now.
Easily.
Which
Probably more. Belgium, crazy. I think, was an even worse example. That would have probably been even more. But that's a topic for another day, isn't it, of course? And kind of just like Saturday's sprint race, because again, sprints are just spoilers now. We basically just watched Merc go backwards, didn't they?
Yeah, and immediately, obviously, Lewis was running P4 just at the start, and Perez was kind of coming through from behind. So Perez overtook Russell and Hamilton eventually, and they were just falling. You had Sainz go past, Stroll went past, which it's curtains if Lance Stroll's overtaking you.
If Stroll's overtaking you, may as well retire.
which
George Russell did.
What George Russell did later on. That was the only real action, was these Mercedes falling behind everyone, including like the likes of Alpines, Ferrari, not multiple Ferraris because one of them crashed on a formation lap.
We only ever saw Sainz once, didn't we?
Yeah, that was
a bit like 2019, wasn't it? Where he went from last to a podium at Brazil and we still never saw him on TV.
Yeah, it's true. And that was, kind of it. There was a bit going on. It was one of those classic 2023 races where, because the race wins dealt with if within 3 laps, within qualifying, you've kind of got stuff happening, but none of it really matters. So
and again, I think the big thing this year, isn't it, is I reckon most of the DRS zones around the Formula One circus need to be shortened by 10-15%. So then you're actually getting battles into the corners. Because that's still the big problem this year, isn't it? Is overtaking's happening, yes, but it's always happening in the DRS zones before they reach a corner because the DRS is just too powerful.
Yeah. And I guess you don't want to accidentally go the other way and be like, DRS is only enough to stay with a car and not to get close enough to pass. But I guess
like it was for a long time.
You just work it out in practice and then maybe make some tweaks if you need to.
Yeah.
But there
was
was
not an easy science.
The main thing to draw our eyes to at the end of the race was Fernando Alonso doing Fernando Alonso things. And with 15 laps to go, Sergio Perez came out the pits 1 lap later than Alonso did in the battle for 3rd place. And Sergio Perez was 5 seconds back, closed up the 5 seconds within 5 laps, and then spent the next 10 laps just trying to pass Fernando and only actually managing it with 2 laps to go. And that was only temporary anyway. So Alonso was absolute defensive masterclass, to be fair. And like people are saying, is this in his like top 10 drives ever? Probably not, for me. But there we go. And the last lap of the race, Alonso and Perez going at it into turn 1 and turn 4, and Alonso in a car 6/10 slower, would you say, generously, is able...
I mean, Checo's at the wheel.
2/10 slower? No.
Half second faster.
Alonso was able to be that wily old fox, as we often say, and mug him off into turn 1, make Perez go on the inside line for no obvious reason, and Alonso does a really, really brave move, run the outside of turn 4, and claim the P3 back and hold it off on a drag race up to the line for the podium, which was insane. First podium since Zandvoort for Fernando.
Yeah, madness, wasn't it? And to be fair, that drag race completely saved what had been a fairly uninteresting afternoon, hadn't it?
Yeah. Everyone's talking about Alonso now, so it's all good.
Exactly, there's at least something to discuss at the end of the afternoon. This time around, I'm going to slate Fernando Alonso a bit more. Why on earth Checo went defensive when Fernando was so far back into turn 1, I will never quite understand. And again, we said about how Checo had done pretty well this weekend. It's another Grand Prix where he hasn't finished on the podium.
Yeah, it's true.
He did it in the sprint, but again, still hasn't had a podium since Monza?
Yeah,
I believe.
That's true.
So 1 week after Fernando Alonso last had a podium?
That's actually mad. There's so many drivers who've had a podium since then.
Appalling by Checo this year. Like, I just...
Yeah.
we say about how much Max could win these races by the fact that Checo still isn't getting podiums. And yeah, I get that had the car been set up and a few little tweaks and changes to it meant that Checo probably could have been far more competitive. And he got screwed in qualifying. He would have had a podium. He would have had many more podiums this year. And, the whole thing about Red Bull only suiting one driver is a very different topic for another day. But Checo shouldn't have lost that P3.
I mean, arguably, he should have been right P2. Just behind Max.
I can appreciate, Lando's getting a lot out of that McLaren at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, he should have been P3 there, shouldn't he?
Yeah, but he's extended the gap in P2 in the championship.
Yeah, only because Mercedes had an absolute stinker, so it looks like his seat is safe.
As did a couple of other teams. Like, I'll admit now, I only watched the race highlights on YouTube. But like every time it cut late in the race, another car had just retired, and there was no real explanation given. So both Alfa Romeos had technical issues.
Both Alfa Romeos went, yeah.
Alex Albon, he was taken out lap 1, wasn't he?
He got taken. Most of them were lap 1. Other than that,
yeah. So he only really had 12 drivers by the end of the race on the lead lap, or on the in the real pack, because obviously Ricciardo and Piastri started a lap down on everyone. So that was kind of another reason why it was a little bit like nothing's going on, because we've lost half the grid. Where are they?
And we lost some of the grid that's often the entertaining battles, isn't it? It is your Albons, your Haas, your Alfa Romeos that have often been providing the late race action as well.
Yeah. So that was a shame. But yeah, that left us with a Grand Prix that finished, and it finished with Max Verstappen.
Wow.
As ever, winning the race.
17 wins in 20
win
Grand
of the
Prix.
season.
Disgusting. It now means he's broken Alberto Ascari's record, or percentage even, of wins in a season. 17 out of 20 now beats the 10 of 12 that Ascari did.
Wasn't 75%?
Many years ago. Yeah.
So that would have been 9 out of 12, wouldn't it?
Sorry, yes.
Now, if Verstappen doesn't win the final 3, he will still beat that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
and people
ridiculous.
wonder why we say that Max's dominance is far more boring than Lewis's ever was. This is why.
It's not Max's fault. He's a good teammate.
Oh, it's a complete system by Red Bull, isn't it? That, I mean, it's getting them the results they want, and that's absolutely fantastic. We've just never seen anything like it in Formula 1.
Need the FIA to do something. Make him slow.
Yeah.
Just take Adrian Newey off him. Just make him do the rounds.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. Oh, we forgot to mention, Jamie, at the start, the interview between Martin Brundle and Bernie Ecclestone. Have you seen this?
I didn't see that. I want to watch it.
Oh, it's so funny.
I heard good things about the old grid walk this week.
So Martin basically walks over to him and goes, "Yeah, I've heard you've had quite an expensive month with HMRC." And Bernie's just like, "Hey, what?" I don't get why he's invited to Grand Prix still, but I do genuinely, like, don't get me wrong, I think Bernie is an absolute numpty, and I don't think he's got a working brain in there. But I do genuinely wonder whether he looks at Formula 1 now, because of course he was all about the money, whether he ever thinks, would he have done things differently had he known how much money there was to be had.
Well, the reason F1's grown so much is because Bernie let go of it.
Well, he got bought out, is what happened. Liberty paid him far more than it was worth for it.
Yeah,
far more
but
than he'd ever get.
Liberty have been so pioneering in giving us Drive to Survive and making the rules kind of make sense. So the credit has to go to them. If Bernie was still in charge, we'd still be racing at like old Abu Dhabi layout, not having overtakes. So
yeah,
like that is Liberty are the MVPs. Bernie can, sit in prison with fraud. So.
Exactly. He did bring his 3-year-old child though, which still makes my skin crawl.
That's disgusting.
There's no way that kid's his. His wife was having an affair. There's no doubt.
He's 93.
Yeah, he had a kid at 89.
Oh dear.
I don't think we want to delve into that topic. That's a Knowing Wheel After Hours podcast to come at some point. But shall we get on then with your quiz?
Oh dear. Pre-show, Matt prepped this quiz in about 2 seconds, so I feel like he's gonna.
This quiz in 2 seconds.
It's gonna be something ridiculous.
So, Jamie183. Obviously, next time out, we're in Las Vegas.
We are.
Are we looking forward to it?
Yes,
Kinda.
I actually am. I think
we're gonna obviously do a pre-show for Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, but of course we've raced at 3 USGPs this year. Although only obviously one of them is known as the USGP, so of course at COTA. So your job today, Jamie, is, going from this year backwards, I want you to give me every winner of the US Grand Prix that wasn't at COTA.
Oh, that's really hard. What the heck?
You got no time limit.
This is
You just talk me
impossible.
through it.
Can you give me the tracks?
I can.
Can you give me anything?
I can. I'm more than happy to give you the tracks.
Okay. I'll try. I'll give it a go at the start, but after like 2022. Oh no. Okay, I'll give it a go.
It's easier once you actually think about it for a
Yeah.
second. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking 2023. Obviously, Las Vegas hasn't happened yet.
Nope. But you can say
2020
Max.
Yeah. 2023, Miami was Max Verstappen.
It was.
2022, Miami was Max Verstappen.
It was. Correct.
I think the one before this would have been Indianapolis 07,
It was.
which was Lewis Hamilton,
Correct.
second race win ever.
Yep.
06, Indianapolis. I watched this fairly recently, so I should probably know.
Do I want to ask why?
Why? 2006 season review, innit? It was either a really bad race for Renault or it was a really bad race for Ferrari, and I can't remember which. Indianapolis. I mean, I might be wrong. I'm just going to have to go out on a limb and say Michael Schumacher.
Correct.
Yes. 05 Indy was the race that we don't speak about in Formula 1
Correct.
with 6 drivers. So it was Michael Schumacher.
Correct.
I'm just going to be saying Schumacher for a long time, I think. 04 surely was Schumacher because he won the first 13 out of the
Correct.
first 14 that year. 03 could have not been, so I won't say it randomly. This is going to be a guess, to be honest. I also don't know how long the race to Indianapolis for, so if I go too far, you can let me know.
No, that's fine.
It wouldn't have been Raikkonen because he only had one win. That was at Malaysia. Alonso's first win was at Hungary, which was after this. So I'm thinking Montoya or Schumacher. I will say it could have been also DC. He was quite good. No, I'll go Schumacher.
Correct.
Okay.
Juan Pablo Montoya famously got disqualified from this Grand Prix.
Really?
And you were wrong. Hungary was before this.
Oh, really?
Because in
Well, there you go.
2003, it was the penultimate race of the year. It was a really unfair disqualification on Montoya, and it completely
ruined the
changed the
championship,
face of
didn't
the championship. Yeah, because it then meant that Michael was able to finish like 8th
Yeah.
in
The last
Japan to win the title.
Well, there you
against
go.
Kimi.
02 was the old photo finish. I remember that one. I don't remember it, but I've seen clips. Sorry. So Barrichello won the race.
Correct.
How long did they race at Indy for?
The year 2000 was the first race.
01. This is complete guessing now. I'm just going to play it safe and say Michael Schumacher.
Incorrect.
There you go. Was it Rubens again?
I'm sorry. No, it wasn't.
Who was it? 01 DC?
No.
Hakkinen?
Yep.
I wouldn't have got that. I thought Hakkinen was...
One of, if not his last ever Formula 1
Hakkinen
win,
dipped
I
after he
believe.
won 2 titles, really, didn't he? So
It's bizarre. Hakkinen's career is definitely a topic for a video one day, because I'm not going to say fraud alert, but fraud alert.
Worst ever
Michael
champion,
Schumacher,
no.
utterly dominant throughout Indy. Should have probably won 2002 as well.
Well, he had the opportunity
that old
to
photo
and
finish.
handed it away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Make
did he do
up
it
for
on
Austria.
purpose, though, Jamie?
Make it up for Austria.
That's always the question. But yeah, it was Mika Hakkinen, the only driver that was able to stop him at Indy. Well, and Michelin tyres, of course.
Well, that didn't stop him.
No, exactly. But stopped anyone else from winning was more the point.
Yeah.
Driver of the day then, Jamie, from the Brazilian Grand Prix. I am going to say, let's just be nice to him and say Alonso.
Alonso was excellent, wasn't he? I want to give a shout out
He
to
was.
Gasly 'cause
he had a good race.
14th to 7th or something like that.
There wasn't many cars behind him at the end, but yeah.
Yeah, Lance Stroll did very well.
Lance Stroll did slightly less bad than usual.
The first top 5 finish since Australia.
Wow. It's the first time he scored more than 10 points in a race since Oz.
Yeah, and that's the only time this season, so the second time.
How has he not had a podium yet still?
Yeah.
We were saying early on this year it was going to be like Stroll would like shithouse a win like before Alonso does.
I mean,
he's still not had a podium
Vegas.
in a car that's been on the podium for like 10 races.
Stroll season. Yeah, it's Alonso drive of the day, isn't it? He did very well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Predictions recap though, Jamie. 3 points in it going into this weekend. And I believe I took a point out of you.
You did indeed.
I predicted Max Lewis Lando. So I get 6 points for predicting Max to get obviously pole, the sprint win, and the race win. Because we don't do sprint pole.
Very well earned points there for you.
Thank you. I then get 1 point for Lando Norris as well. I got him on the podium but in the wrong place. Sadly, had I predicted my Mexico podium, I would have been full score.
Which still never happened.
Which is painful. No, not this season.
No, it never happened, I don't think.
I thought we've had a few before that were bang on in the past.
Someone in the comments tell us. I don't think it has.
One of the knowing wheel maxes.
Yeah.
But I believe I took a point out of you.
You did, because I went Max Verstappen, pole, 2 points. I went Lando Norris, sprint win. Which
you forget you can't battle Max Verstappen.
Wasn't far off. He got pole. He was doing well for like a metre.
He lost the lead at the start, yeah. He led for 50 yards.
He led for even less time than Hulkenberg did back in 2010. Yes, so sadly no points there for me. But Max Verstappen win gave you another 2, so up to 4. And Lando Norris, second place, gave you another 2, so 6 points. And I can't remember who I put third, but it wasn't.
It was Charles Leclerc.
We know what?
That went well for
that
you.
Could have happened if Ferrari knew how to make hydraulics work.
That is very true. You probably did deserve to pull out some more points on me this weekend.
Yes.
But I believe that means with 2 races to go,
there's 2 points in it.
74 to 70.
No, 73 to 72.
73, sorry, to 71 points.
I can do maths.
There's 2 points in it as we head to Las Vegas, Jamie. This is actually an exciting championship battle.
Indeed.
There's not many in F1 in 2023, but this is one of them.
Shall we run through the bottom 7 constructors since that we hyped that up as the big battle to watch?
The bottom 7 constructors?
Sorry, the battle for 7th.
Yes, because I am nervous if I'm Williams right now.
Well, we've got Williams still on 28 points. I don't think they've scored points since COTA.
2 races ago.
AlphaTauri have got points in both the races since. So they're up on 21 points after I nailed them to finish last. And
I said I would be nervous if I was Williams from AlphaTauri.
Yes, and Alfa Romeo and Haas are dead in the water. They're finished. So that's a good time to be me as a supporter of a driver in each of those teams. 16 points for Alfa Romeo, 5 off AlphaTauri, and 12 for Haas.
We forgot to congratulate Max Verstappen. He's also wrapped up the Constructors' Championship this weekend.
On his own?
On his own, with That's 2 races to go.
Also, Ferrari and Aston Martin could fancy themselves against Mercedes and McLaren.
Well, they're 20 and 21 points back each. I am not convinced. I think it'll be closer than it is right now.
Ferrari are more likely than Aston Martin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mercedes need to get... But again, Mercedes have got 3 practice sessions for the final 2 races, so they got a chance still. And Ferrari don't know how to make hydraulics work. That should have been a much more disastrous weekend for Mercedes than it ended up being.
Yeah.
All things considered. Race rating, though, Jamie.
It's hard to tell, because I only watched
As a Brazilian Grand Prix, it was pretty poor, wasn't it? But as a Grand Prix, it goes to show how good Interlagos is.
Yeah,
and how much we need it on the calendar.
The thing is, I get the feeling there was quite a lot going on, but the F1 race highlights...
There wasn't enough cars for there to be a lot going on.
The race highlights also didn't paint a great picture, I don't think, of what actually happened. So the Alonso-Perez battle, for instance, you only saw the last lap of it.
I watched extended highlights from Sky that were like an hour, and it still wasn't even on those highlights, I didn't know that Perez had jumped him and then...
Right.
Fernando came back. So it was all a little bit weird. What I wish had happened was Lando Norris had not pit again and just gambled. to the end of the race.
Yeah, potentially. Though engineers and strategists know a lot more than we do. So
I'm sure they do, but it would be nice to see McLaren at least try to put Max under some pressure towards the end, or at least expose how ridiculously fast that Red Bull is. At least.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10 for a weekend.
I'd agree with that. It was alright.
I think that's fair,
it was alright.
Have we got anything else to add, young Jamie183?
Haas are protesting Kota.
Yes. Yeah. That, I think, is going to be an interesting one. Apparently that's going to happen Wednesday. So, of course, it'll be the day after this podcast goes out, even. So, we'll be back with a bonus show for that. No.
On Twitter, the old Toto Wolff has declared Mercedes will start their 2024 F1 car plans from scratch after the team suffered the lowest moment in their history at the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yep. So, wait for Zero Side Pads V2 to not work again.
Yeah, surely starting your development in November, regardless of how bad your own concept is, isn't the best idea.
But that could be our clickbaity title for this show. Are Mercedes the new Manor F1 team?
Yes, could be.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please do make sure to leave a like. Get yourselves subscribed. Give us those sweet interactions, as Jamie183 likes to say. And yeah, we actually get a little bit of a rest, Jamie. As much as I love hearing your voice, I think we're both quite relieved that we will only be back next Tuesday with the Las Vegas Grand Prix preview show. But yeah, thank you as always for listening, and we'll be back very soon.